Hey guys, Sebastian here with another Cardano video. This time we're going over the March 1st technical report. So first things first, they're talking about how they're doing some upgrades to the various systems. So they mentioned here the Haskell compiler up to version 8.2.2. But if you look at the pull request, they're actually upgrading the version of a few different things also. So they mentioned they're upgrading the version of the log wrapper, which also mentioned in the weekly report later on, along with the Haskell compiler. But they're also getting an update to the Circle util, which is a util library provided by the Circle company, which is one of the contractors that IOHK uses. And then they've also got an update to Universum, which is a custom Haskell prelude, which I believe is also written by Circle. Actually, we can check that real quick. Yeah, so it is written by Circle also. So you can see the changelog for the various versions over here. I'll put the links as usual in the description of the YouTube video. So you can see all the changes that they're getting. Some nice, fixes, some bugs, some quality of life stuff. If you want to know like what is Universum as a library and why people use custom preludes in Haskell, there is this blog post called "Building a Better Custom Haskell Prelude," which I thought was pretty interesting. So if you're interested, there's going to be a link in the description. You can also see, the upgrade for the Haskell compiler here just mentions some of the bug fixes that got included in this version if you're wondering what that's about. And also they're upgrading the packages they're using. So they're using package manager for Haskell that has support for this thing called LTS Haskell, which is long-term support, which is to say, whenever you write a library for a software, you can imagine there's multiple kinds of changes you can do. One change is like if you upgrade, it will break some previous part of code. But there's also possible you make an upgrade that the code doesn't change much. It's just you fix some security issue or whatever. So when you're writing a computer program, it depends on other libraries. You want to get those safety updates without getting those breaking changes. And so this is kind of like how this works. So it says that you'll get the bug fixes and all these things occasionally. So let's see, like maybe weekly. So every week you get these like a small bug fixes automatically introduced into your code. Whereas other major version improvements that might cause like breaking changes will be moved in slower of 36 months. So as you can see, they have multiple versions of these as time goes on, and so they're talking about how they're also migrating to the next version up. And so this is kind of like a bunch of changes. And if you've ever done software engineering, yeah, that's LTS 10 right here. It's the one. Long-term support. Yeah, if you ever done any kind of work like this as a computer scientist, like these kinds of upgrades, they're very tricky. A lot of tedious work. A lot of work goes into these things. So you kind of really appreciate the work that goes into this. But speaking of one of the things they upgraded was the logging, which I have over here. So they upgraded the logger wrapper library, which, as mentioned before, is also by something by Serokel, which is they list out all their features here, but essentially it's a way to do logging Haskell. Where I think one of the big features from eyes, one feature I thought was interesting was it allows for stateful logging in Haskell. So in Haskell, it's a stateless language. But obviously, you can simulate states, and so sometimes you want to, in Haskell, try and keep as many things stateless as possible. And so in certain scenarios where you want to keep your function stateless variables, maybe this is a constraint to the system you're building on, you can use this to build up your logs in a stateless scenario without having to rely on an IO monad or anything of the sort. But yeah, you can check out the features here and how it's used. And if you're wondering why they want to do an upgrade of this package, it's because here's the pull request on Cardano. There's actually a bug fix, and if you go to the actual like a log wrapper library, you can see the bug fix here. We're talking about some problems with exception handling. There's a bug with the async scenarios with IO exceptions, so that's been fixed now, and so that's why this library is updated. They also mention here that the HTTP-based block sync proof of concept will be stopped as the progress in the network has been made obsolete. I'm not sure what made it obsolete per se. It doesn't really mention like the discussion as to why this is now obsolete. I'd be curious to hear their reasoning as to uh, what in the proof of concept made it not as good of an alternative, and why this is now obsolete. But it's something to know because we tracked this briefly on one of our previous update videos. I went through the code briefly with you guys also. So and lastly, they're talking about debate internally about what to do with logs inside the system. So when you're making logs in a computer program, there's kind of like two major approaches. One of them is logs for programmers to easily go through. So if you ever seen like a JSON, it's a popular log format that's very human readable. Where like if there's a problem, a human can go look at it and try and figure out where everything is. And there's another kind of log format which is like a much more efficient, much harder for humans to read, which is usually these structured formats where every log has to abide by a certain format that's parsable by computers easily and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, these kinds of debate happen all the time inside projects about like which ones we should use in which case and the benefits of each one, and do we really need something to be human readable, or and do we care about the performance, these kinds of things. So they're just talking about, discussing the pros and cons of different approaches, and like should they review some of the logging. And they had some previous pull requests, I believe, where they've done stuff like remove some logging to try and make the system faster, I believe, or stuff like that. Because if you have too much logging, your computer's just like writing data to disk, and it's not really, if the logs aren't useless, you're just like wasting CPU cycles. So this kind of stuff is going on. They also mentioned Exchange onboarding support. So as you might have noticed, like they're kind of ramping up more exchanges onto the platform, and so now they've got a single point of contact for the exchanges, which is pretty nice. And they're also, what I think is even more exciting is that with this single point of contact, they're kind of talking to various exchanges, getting their feedback about what should be done, and there will be, I believe it mentions here, yeah, the feedback they're getting will be addressed in documentation. So the GitHub repository for Cardano has various documentation about how one could go about setting up a node, how to set up a wallet, all these kinds of features exchanges will want. But like a lot of people have been asking questions on the GitHub repository and other places. Like I'm trying to set this up, I can't really figure it out. Like I'm trying to read this documentation, but like I can't figure out the step, whatever. So if they make the documentation, it'll be easier for people to like self-serve to be able to solve these problems themselves and get ADA listed on more exchanges and in more projects, which I think is pretty exciting. Here they're talking about the paper wallet generation is kicked off. So there's nothing public about this yet. You can't go see the code for it as far as I know. I haven't been able to see anywhere. But it's nice to know they're getting started. This has been on their roadmap. So I bet in the next roadmap video coming out very shortly, you'll see some more talk about this. And also the release of both the wallet and the settlement layer is also coming up, which is pretty exciting. And I also expect to see it very soon. Next up is the wallet backend. So there's quite a few things in here that are not public yet as far as I can tell. So like one of them is this task on DB schema change. As far as I know, wasn't public last week when they mentioned it. Still not public this week as far as I know, so I'm not sure exactly what it entails. And then the other one is they're talking about the wallet benchmarking. So we've covered that in previous weeks, where this is something they've been doing to try and figure out, where is the wallet slow, how can we make it faster, this kind of stuff. And this is, kind of an ongoing thing. I think, these kinds of things, computer science tend to take a while, and, you have to do a lot of analysis and all this kind of stuff. And, yeah, but, it's always progressing. And one thing is that they mentioned, I believe, that the benchmarks right now are not going that well because the wallet has slowed down. There's been some sort of regression in performance, which may be linked to these various like library improvements they've made, changed the compiler or whatever, which may have had like a unforeseen effects. And so trying to debug exactly what takes longer now than did before, this kind of like a regression analysis is pretty hard to do. And so somebody has to look into it, and so that's what they're working on right now. They've also been talking about a synchronous restoration of a wallet from seed, which I believe they have a change for. Yeah, this is the book benchmarking. Yeah, this is the async restore from wallet. So a lot of people have been complaining that restoring your wallet, given the seed, takes a long time, and so they've made in the past, which will be included in the next release coming up, ways to make that faster. So it should recover your wallet faster. They're trying to do this kind of change where you'll be able to, go through this and restore your wallet asynchronously, which means you don't have to wait. And this is like a good to have. So they're working on it, and I assume this will take another while to do. But good that they're making progress on this. And then I think yeah. So this change here that I was showing you earlier is actually part of a larger feature. So this is like a one change within a set of a bigger changes. So you can see they're spending a lot of time on this to try and make it like a really solid experience, I think. Other than that, they've been talking about the API rewrite, which I've shown in previous weeks. I believe this is right here, where they've been making changes to the API. They've been making a new version based off feedback from exchanges and various other people trying to use the API. So this work is still ongoing, and you can still check it out here, which is also ongoing previous week also. Other than that, there's one last thing they mentioned that they're still working on the bug reports from the wallet. So once you're using the wallet, you'll be able to file a bug report from within the wallet, and these logs will be sent automatically to IOHK to deal with. So it'll be easier to debug why various people using the wallet have been having various issues. They mentioned down here actually that 4 days ago they'll be porting it from scratch. Now I'm not too sure why they're doing this. I'm assuming the backend probably won't change very much. I'm assuming what they mean by porting this from scratch is that the UI will be rewritten, and so I'm not sure what problems with UI, but just so you know, this is happening. But we'll see how this feature ends up. I think it'll be very good to have, so I'm hoping that they make good progress on this and get this done quickly. They also mentioned block streaming, and I think the task related to block streaming is not public yet, so I don't think you can see the code for the block streaming, despite the fact that prerequisites have been completed and tested, and implementation has started. There's no code that we can see for it yet, but I'm sure this will come up slowly. One thing that you can see is this other pull request, which is made for 2148, which is the block streaming change, where they're talking about trying to make the blocks, transferring the blocks to the Explorer or to the wall that become abortable, and also being able to find the thread that is currently working. So this is currently async, so they need to have a way to find the thread that's currently doing this transfer, and they want to have the feature to be able to find this thread that's doing a transfer and just block it, given exceptions, hey, something happened, and so this is what this is doing, and the hopes is that with this better management of the different threads and the communication between queue threads and client threads, it'll be easier to handle the streaming, where we're streaming the blocks from the settlement layer out to whatever depends on it. So we can't see all of it, but we know they're making progress on this. I think something that a lot of people are interested in is this Linux installer and this cross operating system compilation, this kind of stuff. And they've been working on this, and you can see actually down here they have a generated data installer with Nix bundle. So if you go down here, I believe they have linux.nix. So now anybody who wants to build the Linux wallet themselves should have a much easier experience, hopefully. And this is a good indication that they've been working on trying to get all of this working for all operating systems. Of course, it's still it's always possible to build on Linux because all the development work is done on Linux. But they only just shipped the Windows version and the Mac version. I believe they never shipped the Linux version despite the fact that so they are using to develop. But since they've been working towards that, like this thing is coming up. And they also mentioned that they're trying to use DAL, which is a non-Turing complete configuration language. So non-Turing complete is like a computer science term, but like the one of the ways they specify this is that they're saying that these configuration files can be parsed and can be parsed in a finite amount of time. So if you're interested in like knowing more about DAL, there's a blog post that explains it, and you can also go see the code is open source on GitHub. So I'll put that link in the description, and then you can see they've got a pull request that's a work in progress where they're using DAL to generate the configurations for all the operating systems, all that based on like a template, I believe. And so if you go down here, I believe they got somewhere. I'm not sure I'll be able to find it real quick. Yeah, they've had like the installers, and I believe it'll like parse through the script that they've written in DAL and try and like fill out the information. Yeah, so they got like a new folder that manages all of these like DAL stuff, and these are all like the DAL setups for the various operating systems. So this is like you know, maybe not exciting work for people watching this video, but this is like a nice engineering change. It's nice for the engineers working on the system to try and simplify the process of managing configuration files, which can easily get out of control. And they're also, yeah, if you don't know Nix, just check this out. This is like the website for Nix's package manager, and they also mention, yeah, like I mentioned previously, the Data installer on Nix bundle. If you don't know what Nix is, you can like go look at the website and go look it up. Other than that, they're mentioning no work on sidechains, no progress. That's fine. I think this is like a long-term goal. It's going to come eventually, and they're still like in the paper process. So this is like something that will come eventually, and they have videos about this topic if you want to see their research so far. But it's moving along, I guess. The smart contract language, I think a lot of people are interested in. They said that they announced a few days ago, I believe they were looking for, I guess like over a week ago now, that they were trying to hire 6 people, and they've now got like 13 candidates they're interviewing. I think, they're going to get some good people out of this. And actually, they're talking about trying to work on this Solidity compatibility, and like what's the best way to go about this. And like here they're talking about maintaining state in Cardano SL. And if you're wondering like what the problem is here and what is happening, is that the Cardano settlement layer uses the UTXO model, which is used by Bitcoin. However, Ethereum uses the accounting model because it's easier to keep track of smart contracts and all this thing that way. But trying to prove that these models can emulate each other and how to get them to work well with each other is kind of like a hard problem. I don't think anybody has solved it. And so this is like what they're trying to communicate. And they've also mentioned before that they are trying to use these side chains in the future to split Cardano into a computation layer and a settlement layer that'll be independent, one which will use the accounting model by Ethereum, and a settlement layer which uses UTXO. So that's kind of what they're talking about here. But if you actually go to the GitHub repository for the EVM semantics on the K framework, where they're trying to use K as Charles mentioned in multiple videos and interviews. They're trying to use the K framework to build kind of like a meta language platform, and they're trying to do some investigation on the EVM to try and build this compatibility with K. So there used to be not much activity on this GitHub repository. You can see in the previous days, like they've really ramped up. They've been like making more changes. So it's pretty exciting to know that they're making progress on this. Actually, if you go to the repository, you can look in proofs, and you can see they have like some work on like ERC20 tokens and stuff like that. So it's pretty exciting. If you're interested in this project, you can go on GitHub, watch the repository and keep track of their work on here. One thing that was not mentioned in the weekly report, but I think it's pretty cool, is that they're also working on cross compilation on Windows using Nix, which I mentioned like earlier. And so they've got an engineer that's been working on this, and they're making like a good and pretty quick progress. So if you're interested in this kind of like a cross compilation, I think they wrote like a blog post on this and shared it on like the Haskell Reddit or something. The guy who made this is like an active blogger in the Haskell community. So if you're interested in like trying to follow his progress on this, he's pretty open about the progress. He tweets about this very often, so you can go follow up on that. And that's it for this week's video. So hopefully you found this interesting. As usual, you can find my YouTube channel, my Twitter, and all these kind of social platforms. I'm always on there. I have my donation address in the description if you want to send me some tokens to encourage me to keep working on this kind of stuff. And you can always just subscribe to my YouTube channel to be always up to date with the latest technical reports and other such content for Cardano. All right, see ya.